Hey everybody, welcome back to the second episode of Concentration Check. I'm Wyatt,
And I'm Tony.
and we're here today to bring you another topic. This one right now is actually the types of DMing. We posed a poll on Amino, or I should say I did, and offered many different type of episodes that people would want to see, and this was actually the most voted on topic. So, in regards to types of DMing, how does it play? How does it factor? Um, I really only see two general things. There's your narrative focused and your combat focused. Narrative would kind of be something like uh, what I do and what I focus on is progression of the story. So I write the plot, I write how everything would go, and the characters and a rich storyline, rich story detail, um, and the combat. I wouldn't say it falls to the wayside, but there's less of an emphasis on it. I I even incorporate narrative into combat as well, where I will, describe how if an NPC is being attacked, how they're feeling, how the like their pupils dilate in fear, or if they're sweating profusely, or they can't grip a sword because their hands are shaking so much. Um, Oftentimes in my games, if it's a really narrative heavy campaign, uh, I'll actually apply the rule of cool, which, for any of those of you who don't know, rule of cool will apply as like if you describe something and not only is it feasible, but if it makes for a good showing, I'll allow it. And you, on the other hand, Tony, you prefer combat.
Yeah, I really love combat. It's one of the things I really love about being a DM. I do love the story. I do. I do it in a different way. I do it in the way of acting out how these creatures or people might actually interact with the party in the fight, whether it's taunting you or you know being being an ogre, for example, will they might, if you just attack them out of random, they might pose a question to you. Why do you hurt them? Right? They're not the most brightest, and they're gonna kind of argue, and then they could even argue amongst themselves in the middle of it if they're actually taking advantage of maybe one of them saying, "Oh, well, who's gonna eat them? There's only one person here." For example, if like a rogue snuck in, but I do sort of apply the rule of cool, but it's more towards what you're doing. Is it creative? What kind of advantage might that be? And that's kind of how I do combat. But uh, that's
Pretty much it.
yeah, that's
And
pretty
pretty much
much
it.
it.
Yeah, and that's kind of why I personally I don't like combat focus because that's all there is to it. Narrative wise, I can make either political intrigue, or I can actually go the route of a war, or I can go to the route of a I don't know feuding thieves guilds or anything else like that. And usually for combat focus, all there is war, or a tournament, or something else. That's just how I see it.
Yeah, it it does kind of make it difficult to add narrative to the combat, but in the sense, um, a lot of these creatures, they're not really gonna have much to say regardless of what's happening. They're there to fulfill the duty of killing them and then possibly getting something from them, or to push the narrative of the campaign. So sometimes I find less detail is better, because then it leaves the player's imagination to run free with it, and then they might even describe what they see. I kind of like letting the players kind of describe what they're doing in a feasible manner.
Hmm. I do like the freedom that it gives. I like it's more simplistic, but I feel that people get more invested in their characters if they have a wider role to play in the world other than just, yeah, we're part of an adventuring guild. We kill stuff. Give us your money. Like, I don't know. It seems not fake. I guess shallow.
Empty,
Yeah,
you'd say?
empty, empty. That's what I would constitute it as. Would be empty. I'm not sure how you feel about it, but
I feel like a fair kind of balance to it is kind of up before the combat is more of where I do the narrative versus in the combat. But even so, it's especially in the campaign that I'm running for for right now. Um, it's very combat driven, like almost 100% of it's combat. There's very little narrative, but then again, I've pushed the narrative at points, but it seems like combat. I'm kind of in the motor hobo ish part of.
murder hobos, the great bane of any DM's existence. Unless you're into that sort of thing.
Which is nothing wrong with being a murder hobo.
I mean, no, but it just makes for a very one-dimensional it makes for a very one-dimensional game.
Sometimes you just want to swing your axe at something as hard as you can, over and over again.
Yeah, you wanna hit stuff, and everyone wants to kill the halfling bard that keeps singing the same songs over and over and over again. I mean, I just I have always had trouble with murder hobo campaigns. They have never lasted past, I want to say, 6 sessions.
And I think it's because I'm thinking in my mind something tactical that they're going to use this opportunity to, you know, make their story versus me present the story. If that makes sense. I want them to go find this camp, investigate, they find something, maybe they go back and talk to someone. But or completely ignore that and run back out and leave the city to be attacked
And set fire to the forest, huh?
and set fire to the forest.
Yeah, there you go, targeting me again.
Yeah.
So, for those of you, actually all of you who don't know, I accidentally set a forest on fire because I'm in a murder hobo campaign and one must always adapt and overcome.
And pissed off a dryad.
Okay, that wasn't my fault. We're getting off topic. Okay,
Yeah.
the overall consensus is, I have my viewpoints, he has his, but it's really the DM's choice, and a great DM can make a great game regardless of the style.
Right.
Um, which comes to our third style, which is, a hybrid of both, as you know, and I've never seen it done well.
Yeah, we were actually talking about this not too long ago about running a session together and seeing how that goes. We're still in the process of planning it, but I think it might turn out well. We're actually, I think it's in your campaign where we're about to kind of test the waters with this a little bit.
Yeah, we are running a part in the campaign where it is kind of like this grand festival, and there is a one-on-one single elimination tournament. And I did that for two reasons. One, it gives those who don't really fight but want to, it gives them a chance to sort of prove themselves. Um, Two, kind of breaks up the normal monotony of go here, kill monster, come back, get gold. And three, it, like I said in the last episode, it gives the player character spotlight for that 30 minutes to an hour that they are either getting the shit pummeled out of them or, um, you know, valiantly bashing their foes. They have the spotlight, and you've helped me out. Tony's helped me out with how I'm running it. So since his character uh, didn't decide to take part, whatever the reason was, I pulled him to the side and I said, "Hey, pull up all the humanoid stat blocks from the monster manual and write me down a list of, let's say, 8. And you can customize them how you want, just as long as they're not too overpowered for a level 4 adventurer to take on single-handedly." And then he proceeded to almost kill our cleric, who has an AC of 20
In the first round.
in the first round.
Yeah.
Not your best showing.
Well, multi-attack does come in very handy against people.
And it's kind of side DMing that would kind of help the newer DMs or those people who want to start DMing more. If you feel the inspiration to, I want to control the table, I want to set the story. Always just ask your DM, like, hey, if there is there anything I can do. Is there any part I could come up with? He could have you help plan an encounter for another group. He could help you create a character, but it's all practice at the end, and it's getting you ready so you have that confidence to sit down with either 4 friends or 4 strangers and sort of. There's a spider in the studio, and it almost crawled on your face.
Yep. And it's now gone. Saved my life.
Yeah, you're welcome. Where was I?
It's a good perception check.
I know. Where was I?
You were talking about...
Confidence? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it gives you the confidence to sit down with like 4 strangers or 4 friends and create something that no one's really created before. And just don't be worried about which group you fit into. Don't try to say like, oh, I want to be this combat focused DM or I want to be this narrative focused DM. You'll know which one you are because people will tell you. The groups we play with, people always say that mine feels like a novel and Tony's feels like a video game.
Yeah. I do think it depends. If you have too much narrative sometimes, though, people kind of want some combat. So you kind of just ask your players as the DM. I ask my players after the session, I'm like, is there anything you liked? What you dislike? What can I do to improve your experience? Because at the end of the day, it's about everyone's enjoyment. Are they enjoying the encounters or do they find it boring? You can kind of gauge how the campaign is going is if you stop getting answers or descriptions of what they're going to do from the characters themselves. Which I had one session recently where it's probably my fault. I should have planned a little bit better on how to do it. But you just have the feel at the table, and then at that point just call it. Reset the next day, and you just move on from there.
Yeah, knowing to tell when interest is waning, and when it's just not good to continue on, or people are gonna get pissed off, or people are just gonna do dumb stuff like become a murder hobo. That's a really good trait to have. we he sat in on a game I DM'd. I think it was 7 players, 6 players, and everyone else besides that one guy was interested. And he was the type of person that he said like, "Oh yeah, I always wanted to play D&D. I've always wanted to do this, you know, everything." But he didn't really know what it was about. And he sat down for the first time, and everyone else is enjoying themselves except for him, primarily because he wasn't the main focal point of the story. And he always told me, he's like, I wish there was more combat. I wish there was more combat. I wish we could do this. I wish we could do that. Which put me out of my comfort zone. And, I was designing more combat. I was um, putting them in more encounters. And the reason that I'm not a combat focused dungeon master is because I have a tendency to kill my players.
Yeah, with the combat focused DM style, or even bordering the lines of it, you, especially with campaigns that you're creating yourself, it's it takes a lot of looking at the creature and understanding what this creature does and how they're actually going to affect it. I actually take time and kind of run a couple playthroughs, with my PCs in the game, and see if they actually survive. Like, do they survive once out of 10 times? Do they survive 5 times out of 10 times? And I try to leave it around an even 50-50. Maybe even giving the PCs a little bit more advantage, because it's fun to have a challenge, but it's not fun to have too much of a challenge.
And when you say you run them through, just to clarify, you actually take their stat blocks, like on days that you aren't playing, or that we aren't playing, and you'll run through the scenario that you've set in your head, and you'll see like how many times they survive, how many times they die.
Yeah, and I'll even give creatures like advantage on how they're moving, or even kind of metagame the enemies against them.
Now, what is one thing you won't do? Like, what is one absolute faux pas of your DMing of a combat focused campaign? What is one thing you won't do?
Um, I try to avoid the PCs angering the city, because once you anger the city, they are no longer friendly, and now they're hostile, and now you're running in a evil campaign, or a survival campaign at that point, where you might even join the enemy team, and actually that could actually be a pretty good way to run with it. So
I think I just gave you an idea accidentally, and I don't like it.
yeah.
Um, on the flip side, I will not. I won't in a my narrative focus. I will not let a player try to control or try to force control over another player. If there's like some magic MacGuffin that forces a person's body, or pretty much turns them into the thrall of whoever wields it, right? I mean, first of all, you're asking permission, like, hey, is it okay if this person takes over your character? If they say yes, you know, that's fine. They if they're comfortable with it. And two, you got to make sure the person that is the one in charge, that they are both mature enough um, to kind of handle this, keep the narrative pushing forward, as well as actually, I think it's just mature enough. Really, it all comes down to maturity. Um, but other than that, yeah, I never do that. I never allow control to be forced over from one player to another. And I tend to not allow out of encounters, like out of this tournament. I think this is the first time of potential PvP.
Yeah, I think PvP just causes a lot of problems, because no one wants to be seen as weaker than the other person. They want to be either greater or equal to, but generally greater than their allies. So I kind of never do PvP. I try to push against PvP. Now, maybe one of these times I might, in the future, do something, but it's gonna be known that hey, PvP is there, and are they going to attack directly? Probably not. I'm probably going to have them with guilds and then build up to a player versus player. But you have to understand, sometimes people are not mature enough to say, "Hey, I lost this fight," and they might get upset out of the game.
I think especially with a lot of newer players, and I just want to preface this as as the show goes on, like as we get more in depth into the different topics we will discuss. I'll say newer players a lot, and sometimes I'll speak of it in like a negative connotation. Um, I only say this not out of you know hatred or contempt for people who are just now getting into the game, because if anything, it's complete opposite. They're the reason that Wizards of the Coast keeps cranking out so much stuff. They're the reason that we have fifth edition now. We have things like Stranger Things, where people are getting into something that came out, what, 30 years ago, longer, and I absolutely love it. But there's a lot of mistakes that I see, and I'm bringing it up here so in case anyone who listens in, they'll know, like, okay, don't be like this person. And back on topic, the things I see with newer players is, okay, it's a tabletop game. I'm making a character. That means he's important to the story. Yes, he's important to the story. He is not the focus point of the story. And um, he is not the focus point of the narration in my case. He's not the focus. He's not the main person who is leading the charge in combat in Tony's case. And just got to understand of, you're working together as a team. And that's what we're here to facilitate as DMs. Whether I am telling a grandiose story of the Prince and the Pauper, or Tony is having a 6-hour session on 1,001 ways to kill goblins.
Oh yeah, you gotta enjoy some goblin slaying occasionally. But let me pose a question to you: what do you think about a campaign that doesn't have a written down narrative, but does not have combat encounters? What if we had a campaign where we rolled the dice and kind of went off the manual, or maybe select a couple creatures, and that's what they'll encounter, instead of like a kind of narrative driven or a combat driven. What if it's just you're here in the city, what do you do?
So a player driven.
Yeah, player driven.
I've never thought of that before. I definitely feel like it could be interesting, and I will give you a question in return. Which would this work better for? A group of 5 new people, or a group of 5 veterans, and why?
Well, I'm gonna start out with the new players. It could potentially go well for them, but it could potentially cause them to all die at the same time. That being because a lot of new people go, let's all go in different directions and find out information.
Let's split the party.
Whereas veterans are more likely to either go in pairs or go as a group somewhere and go, hey, I want to find some local. I'm trying to make some money here. What can I do to earn some money? And they'll go, what might be your qualifications? Like, well, I got this axe, and I have all these other people here. Pretty strong band of adventurers. I think that is both of them. I think could have a good experience, but it might be a little bit difficult for the DM, kind of on the spot. It might actually help the DM for future, kind of challenge them to think on the spot and have that kind of quick wit.
When you say challenge, you bring that up. I actually feel like it's easier from my standpoint to improv versus yours. Um, you can improv a monster's stats all day, but if anyone has the gumption to read a monster manual, they're gonna know like, oh, I should have died here and here and here. Excuse me. Whereas I can make shit up on the fly, and it's my world. It's a new place that no one knows the inner workings of.
And that's the thing. Um, yes, people can look at the manual and kind of metagame it or whatever, but the thing you have to think about is you're not always fighting the same thing. It could be a stronger creature. It could be a weaker creature. So, the, I feel like creatures vary, right? So you can have one goblin that knows how to swing his sword twice in one attack, or it could be a weaker goblin that can just swing it once. It's really up to kind of what you think the party can handle. If they can handle a goblin attacking twice and having 50 health, why not have a very strong? I think that can be like a very kind of. Obviously, you give a little bit more detail, right? You go, this is kind of a stronger looking goblin who looks to be like the pack leader of this group of goblins, maybe like a squad captain. You know, he has feathers. He's adorned with feathers and has a two daggers in his hand versus his companions who probably don't have any feathers. They just have a piece of wood on them, and you kind of make him look a little bit more important than everyone else.
You know, I hear that a group of goblins is called a hob. So, would you say that a leader of a group of goblins would be a hobgoblin?
Yeah, you can. Obviously, there's a hobgoblin, right? You can have. Aren't they just older goblins?
Yeah.
They just live longer. But yeah, who knows? You roll stats for your characters. Kind of same thing with monsters. You can craft your monster to fit what you want it to fit.
You know, I spent a lot of time, like at least 30 seconds, making up that goblin pun, and you just completely rolled past it. I don't appreciate that. But at the end of the day, people, whether you decide to be a narrative focused DM, be a combat focused DM, or just be somewhere in between, never forget the golden rule to always roll initiative. I'm Wyatt, and this has been Tony, and thank you for joining us on this second episode of Concentration Check.
Thank you, and see you guys next time.